So we always talk about stockpiling, prepping, buying this, having this, make sure you have a lot of this. But how much is this? How much water do we need? How much ammo do we need? How much cash do we keep out of the banks? How much food do we need per person? Those are all great questions. So today we're going to try to talk about some of those details and how we here at the Max Prep, but also how much do we believe that you need at a minimum when it comes to taking care of your family. Today's video is going to be a good one, and it starts right now. So between weather and the darkness, because it's still pretty early in the mornings, we're actually filming in light under our carport outside. So sorry about the lighting. I hope it's not too bad in this video for sure. If you're new to the Max, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell. There's always hopefully good information here on our channel, and we hope that you will like and subscribe. Also share this video with people who it can help. So let's jump right into it. Now, when I say this, please understand, because I'll have naysayers on both sides. I'll have people say that is so not enough. You gotta have X amount. And then I'll have some people say, oh my gosh, that's overwhelming. How can you afford that? How can you have that much? That's useless. You're the reason for the shortage. So I'll get it from both sides. But I wanna get you to understand, if you think this is a lot, then you need to work towards it. If you think this is not enough, I'm saying minimals. So when I say this list, we have gotten way more than this personally. But the purpose is we have to get to the point where we're building up for something. It's like, for instance, in retirements, people always tell you, 10 years ago was the best time to start retirement. Well, the next best day is now. So it's the same way with prepping and homesteading. We have to realize that it's overwhelming maybe at first because we don't know what to do, how much to have, and we can't just go spend thousands at a store to buy all of it. That's okay. Work towards it. So it's a goal to work towards to have this much, but at the same time, this is not the maximum. You need to keep adding to your surplus, rotating well. So let's jump right into it. How much food do we need? So we're going to talk about it in 3 different points: stockpiling food, growing food, and then also ready-made food. First and foremost, if we're stockpiling food, good rule of thumb, not that it has to be the end-all be-all, but this is just my thoughts, and a lot of the people probably think about the same way. Per person, I would say you need 200 to 250 pounds of grain per person per grain. Now that seems like a lot to most, and then some people say, oh, it's not enough. That means that can get you through a major scenario. So when people say, well, how long does that last? Well, it comes down to this. 250 pounds of rice, or 250 pounds of corn, or 250 pounds of flour per person. That's a lot of food. It's not necessarily saying that you're going to use that to eat and everybody has to have allocated portions. What I'm saying though, if you're a family of 4 and you have 1,000 pounds put up of rice, you have 1,000 pounds put up of corn, you have 1,000 pounds put up of flour, you're not going without for a long period of time. Depending on how long you want it to last depends on the ration and the leniency that you have and the stock that you've built up. If you've got a full stock of saying I've got 250 pounds per person, 4 different grains, 4 different carbs, then you're doing very well, and it allows you to be a little bit more lenient in your measurements. So say for instance you're cooking for your family. I don't think no one would say that you need 4 cups of rice for 4 people. That's a lot of rice, especially if we're looking in a rationed situation. So at minimal, you're getting 250 days worth of grains. But to be honest with you, who is eating a cup of rice or a cup of corn or a cup of flour each and every day? It's just a good rule of thumb. Per person, you need to have 200 to 250 pounds of rice. If you like corn, same way. If you like flour, same way. So when we talk about grains, that's the way I would lean towards. That is stockpiled grains. This would also go down to things like oatmeal, things like grits, things like noodles. So anything that you're stockpiling and it's gonna last a long time and we're gonna make sure that they're shelf stable, those things are all very much shelf stable. Now there's ways to make it more shelf stable. So for instance, if we get any grains, we put them straight in the freezer just for a little bit, just to make sure there's nothing on the rice, on the dried beans, on the corn, whatever we're purchasing. We're making sure we're throwing it in the freezer for a little bit, flash freeze it just for a second, and then we're taking it out. Now this is what we do, and a lot of people say it's overkill. We put ours in a Mylar bag, we vacuum seal it or seal it up, and then put it also in a food grade bucket. We keep those out of light, and we make sure everything is not exposed in there in a controlled environment. So we have a storage room that we put, it's kind of like a food storage room. We make sure there's lights not on all the time. We have a good flow of air going through there, and that we hardly ever go in there. There's no natural light going into that room. It allows our food to know it's going to be stored longer. So going back to the food of your grains, 250 pounds per person is what you need to work towards. It's very good. Now, do you have to have that to start off? No. But I would say if you're starting to stockpile food by a pound at a time, by 2 pounds at a time, by 5 pounds at a time, however you can do it, start stockpiling some of these things. Make sure it's not one-dimensional. Make sure it's not just rice. Make sure it's not just corn. But you need to end up getting to the point where every amount of grain or every amount of dried good that you have, 200 to 250 pounds per person. When we talk about growing food, if we're growing grains, or if we're growing vegetables, or we're growing animals, all those things are a food surplus that is living on the farm, or that you're going to be planning to bring the surplus in. Your dried goods is one thing, but eating fresh, eating live food, eating off the land, eating in season is key. It helps supplement the food that you're having to purchase, and it also helps those foods to last longer. So when we talk about planting gardens, you can't always plant a surplus of food, and you may not have the land to do that. So I would challenge you this: growing food is supplementary any other food that you have. It's all supplementing each other. So 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%, it all adds up to be 100% of your diet. So if you're growing food, you need to be growing. Now, again, we're growing thousands of square footage of food, but at minimal, you need to be growing a 4x8 packed full of food, especially your leafy greens, your vegetables. You need to be growing a 4x8 section for each person. Now that is not nearly big enough when we're talking about taking care of your family. However, it is a good supplemental way of looking at, okay, if I have 2 members of my family, we need to be doing an 8x8 bed and making sure that we're growing as much food as we can in that bed. Now that is for more fall and winter grow, because things can grow tighter. Lettuces, cabbages, leafy greens, turnips, kale, those things can grow very much on top of each other. If we're talking spring grow, you need to be tripling that. You need to make sure if you can grow, instead of a 4x8, you're growing 3 4x8s per person. Now that's a lot of growing, and I know people are saying, well, how do you get those numbers? It's not the fact of getting a certain size numbers, it's the fact that you're trying to supplement growing. When you start off small, then you have successes of growing. When all of a sudden you grow a great 4x8 bed and you realize, oh, it's not enough food. There's definitely not enough this or that in this bed, so let's add to it. You need to get to the point where you're growing some of your food, even if it's in containers. That's not a bad thing. We have a video coming out with a certain style raised bed that you can purchase, build right there, put it on your patio and grow food. Now that doesn't mean you have to have a 8x8 or 4x8 planter. It just means you're starting to grow food. But by and large, if we start off small, growing things like a 4x8 garden per person, then we realize there's success there. We can get bigger, we can grow more, and take care of our family and supplement our food. The more successes you have in the little gardens, the bigger your success will be for the 10,000 square foot gardens or for the big fields of whatever you're growing. Real quick on freeze-dried foods. We have a freeze dryer. I love a freeze dryer. To me, it's one of the best investments you can make. If you're interested in that, of course, there's a link below, but they are very pricey. Plus, we're trying to grow our own food and freeze dry it. But say, for instance, you don't have that capability and it's only a few of you and you're just wanting some freeze-dried food for safety. There's places like My Patriot Supply, Legacy Food, 4 Patriots, Wise Company. I mean, there's all kinds of companies. You can go to any big box store and they're selling in camping supplies, you know, freeze-dried foods. I would challenge you to buy from companies, check pricing. I mean, we have My Patriot Supply and Legacy Food Storage. Both of those are down below. However, it's not necessarily saying you have to use those. But I do believe you need a 3-month supply of freeze-dried food per per person. So for instance, a lot of companies sell a 3 to 6 month supply. A lot of people sell a 6 month supply. You may can say, okay, we have 2 people, so we're going to go and buy 6 month. It may be one of those situations where you buy a tub at a time, a 1 month supply, and you add to it. It may be where you're buying just portion MREs from a local big box store, and you say, okay, I want to add up to making sure I'm getting a good caloric density per day. If you're looking at freeze-dried foods, try to be around a 2,000 caloric diet per person per day for 3 months. That's something to work towards. It can get pricey if you're turning around and saying, I'm just going to buy 4 3-month supplies. It will cut into your budget dramatically. So make sure you're doing it over time. We have added to our freeze-dried food, even purchasing a lot of that freeze-dried food by quality, and make sure the companies have good ingredients in your food. The whole purpose of making sure you have food is make sure you have good quality food at the same time. That's the same way with your grains, same way of growing, and of course with freeze-dried foods, 3-month supply at minimum. You need to work towards that and then add to it. Ultimately, we always say you need 7 years worth of food. That's a big target, but I think it's always something to work towards. Secondly is water. We're going to talk about water. Water storage is key. It is the lifeblood of who we are. Food is no good without water. We're not going to make it without water. So if you have running creeks, running lakes, a hand pump water well, all those things are, key. That's trumping everything, because you're allowing yourself to have a water source. If you live next to those things or live next to a body of water, you can boil, you can use live straws, you can purify. We have videos on the water wells. We have videos on purifying your water. That's a whole nother discussion. But say for instance, you're starting to purchase water, or you're starting to get water and you want to put it up, and how much that is. You need at minimum, if you're purchasing 55-gallon buckets or drums, you need at minimum 100 gallons per person. I know that sounds like a lot, but that's really not a lot. That's a minimal. Water is so key to our life. Now, that's not talking about taking baths and taking care of your hygiene all the time. That's a whole nother a bit of water that you need, and that's what we call gray water, and you could utilize even some of the water over and over and recycle water. That's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day. But if you're saying, I need to make sure I have water stockpile for a situation or scenario, 100 gallons per person is minimal. That won't get you far, but that will get you to a point where hopefully that will get you through any bad scenario. You can literally buy those little 1-gallon jugs at Walmart for $1 to $1.50. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down, depending on what state you live in or where you live across the world. I wouldn't challenge you to purchase those. I would say buy you a food grade water bucket that they sell. We have one linked below, but there's a lot of companies that do, and you start filling it up. You can fill it up with well water, you can fill it with tap water. There's ways that you can purify it, make sure it's okay to drink later on in life, later on when you actually need it. But ultimately, making sure you have at least 100 gallons per person is minimal. If we're a family of 8, we need 800 gallons of water. If we're a family of 2, we need 200 gallons of water. A lot of homesteaders or preppers that have different opinions on that. But if you have a water source, that's different. But say for instance, your waters get contaminated and you're not able to use that. Chemicalized or contaminated water, or fallout happens with nuclear, how good is that water to drink? Can we clean that water up good? So we have wells, we have creeks, and we have a hand pump for our water well, and we have a big lake. But you know what? We still stockpile water. It's a good practice to have minimal of 100 gallons per person. Thirdly is our security, our ammo, our firearms. Those things are things people don't want to talk about. I don't even know if this video will be where you can see it for long, and it might be shadow banned because we're talking about this, but when we talk about that, it's security in defending our homestead or our preps. Now, if you look behind me, we have, this is one of the doors to my home. Now, why do we have this structure and it doesn't look like a typical door? Because we build security. We have a video coming out on how we secure our homestead, how we protect our home and our preps. A lot of times we'll get these naysayers on these comments and say, well, we're not going to prep, we're just going to take it from someone. Well, that's a stupid way of looking at it, and very foolish, because the people who are prepping, who are ready for these kind of scenarios, they're not just prepped with food. Most of the times they're taking care of other elements too, and I digress. But for instance, if you're talking about ammo, or you're talking about certain calibers, or you're talking about firearms, how many do we need? Personally, I think any firearm or any EDC that you have that is pertinent to you and your security, you need a minimal of 800 to 1,000 rounds per firearm. Now that is a minimal. I don't think you can ever have enough. So is 800 to 1,000 rounds enough? No, I would say really minimals. Really, you probably need to be closer to double that, 2,000 or so or more. But that is making sure not only do you have enough rounds for defense, not only do you have enough rounds for practice, you have enough rounds to be able to utilize as now you have an asset at your property. If all of a sudden things go bad and we have situations where life gets tough and you're having to defend your preps or defend your home or take care of your family in a chaos, not only do you have enough rounds for safety, you have enough rounds to be an asset to then trade for other bargaining tools. Now, I would never say barter ammo with someone you don't know. I would never say barter ammo, period. But I have made videos where if worse comes to worse and you have to have food or you have to have water, you know, ammo and ammunition and firearms, those things are good bartering tools just like money. So we need to make sure that we have a good stockpile of those things. So you may have several firearms. You may have several hunting rifles. However, if we're talking about safety, security, EDC, you know, what we're carried every day are our main pertinent firearms for safety, I would say you need 800 to 1,000 minimal rounds, and plus adding to it. Now we're talking about hunting rifles, and we're talking about, you know, being able to go out and kill a deer or kill a rabbit or process an animal. For those rounds, you may say we just need a good 300 to 500 rounds. They can be used for defense, but really that's more for hunting. So I would say if you're looking at hunting rifles, 300 to 500 rounds are okay. When we're talking about safety and security, 800 to 1,000 at minimal. Even going up to 2,000 would be pertinent. And to say a maximum number, I would say there is no maximum. You need to always add to the stockpile. We always keep ours in a controlled environment. It's like our food. Ammo's a lot like food. We keep it in controlled environments. We keep it in a dark ammo cans. We want to make sure that they're not just in one place, they're in several places, but we want to make sure that there's no light going to them. They're not just sitting out collecting dust. They're in nice, tight, sealed ammo cans, because that is very important. It's a livelihood, is security, is defense, is a way that we can take care of our family. It's just as important as the food and water. Last thing is going to be money, cash. How much cash do you need? Now, we have tons of naysayers on both sides of the fence. We'll have people say, you know, you don't need cash because cash will be worthless. We have some people say, well, we stockpile all cash because we don't trust banks. I think there's a balanced approach here. For us, if we're talking minimals, I would say you need a minimal in the bank to cover bills for a month to two. Now, 3 to 6 months is more important for that. But when you're talking about putting it in the banks, you have drafts, you have things that you set up for your accounts, your insurances, and normal life that you have to have, because you have to write checks and have to mail those off. You can't send cash in the mail. That would be stupid. So don't do that. So you need to have at least a month or two in banks minimal. Now, if you have 3 years worth, that's okay. I'm just saying minimals here. So if you're keeping only minimal in the bank, make sure you keep them 1 to 2 months in there. It's always good to have access to that via checks or via debit card, just in case you're off and you have no cash on you. It's a good security net for balance. However, in scenarios where we talk about chaos, collapse, crap hit the fan kind of situations, cash is still king until total world shuts down with the fact of cash shutting down. That can happen. Most chaos and unrest that happens is more based on other things, and cash is good to have, like hurricanes we've talked about, like bad weather we've talked about, like major power outages, because nobody wants a check, nobody wants a card in a situation where a hurricane happens or there's no power to run the credit card. That's plastic, it's worth nothing. So cash is still king in those situations. In cash, you need to have at least 3 to 6 months of expenses and 3 to 6 months of livelihood safe in safekeeping. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your food, all your ammo, and all your money in one area. That's pretty stupid. As a prepper, you need to make sure you have caches somewhere, and that, I mean, like the cases, the cache, the caches, the catches, however you want to call them. Have some things buried, have some things moved, have your stockpile in a different location, have a trusted friend who can keep some things for you and y'all can share and be a community. I'm not saying keep everything together, but I am saying over time build up 3 to 6 months of income as a minimal to have in cash to be able to utilize if you ever had to. if your livelihood depended on it and you had to bug out, so you can't stay in this home, in this fortress you've built, having 3 to 6 months of cash on hand to be able to go wherever you need to go is key. If cash begins to be worthless, then you have a way that you can light your fire then. So it's one of those situations where if cash becomes worthless, we're in a major catastrophic situation, and cash is probably not going to be anything that's of importance. That's going to go back to number 3. That's going to be probably the most important. So we need to realize that cash is still king as of right now. It's still very important. And what we've seen, even though nations fall and the currency falls, I think of Argentina and Sri Lanka and some of those places now are and Venezuela, and I feel like we're going to those areas as America. I believe we're kind of going down that way, but that's a different video. But what I'm saying is, most governments will not let their currency fall because they know that's the only livelihood they got. That's kind of the last resort situation. So right now, cash is still king. If all of a sudden a collapse happens, cash is still king. All of a sudden the world kind of falls to pieces and America falls to pieces, then cash is not king. We do rely back on 1, 2, and 3, very much important, and you're going back to a bartering system. But you are at that point in a very bad situation. So I know we're gonna have a lot of comments on this video saying how stupid I was, how wrong I was, how this made no sense. You need more, you need less. Take all that with a grain of salt. Take my advice with a grain of salt and learn to build your preps based on what you need. I'm telling you, this is a good rule of thumb. This is a good balance, a good average approach for you and your family. Work towards this, work past this, and start looking at it as a game-changing way to take care of your family. Gaining wisdom by stockpiling food, water, ammo, and security. And then number 4, with cash, those things are all good. Then it comes down to, then you can add to more assets, more bartering capabilities, more precious metals, more supplies. All those things are good. This video is talking on 4 main keys of your life and how much you need of each of those, because it will be good to have as you go through any situation, from hurricanes to other bad weather scenarios, major power outage to a straight up collapse. It's good to be ready just in case. I always tell people prepping and homesteading are just a part of insurance. We don't want to use our life insurance. We don't want to use our health insurance, but it's there just in case. We don't want a fire to happen to our house, but it's there just in case. Our preps are the same way. If I look back at the age of 90 and my kids say, well, Dad, we never used all those preps, that's not a bad thing. That's saying it was an insurance to have, it's good to have, but ultimately we didn't have to have it. But all of a sudden, if we had to have it, we had it. Guys, thank you so much. Comment below. Tell me what you think of this video. God bless. Happy homesteading, y'all.